Daytime edition of our study group. So if anybody notices the difference in the light, it's not evening here. At any rate, we're going to go ahead and finish on repaying debts of gratitude today. We left last week off on page 727. I'm going to back up just enough to give continuity to what we're reading. Since we have time, I'm going to take my time and finish. Okay? So is everybody ready?
Yeah.
Right, we're going to start on page 726. We're going to start out with the second paragraph in the second column, where it says, "Thus the doctrines." Hang on. You going to go get that handle, Mom?
Yep.
All right, so I'll go ahead and start reading. Because this is repetition of last week anyhow. He had just been talking, what had he been talking about last week? Do you remember? He'd been going all over all the stuff that happened after Tentai, right? And in the midst of, and actually after Dengyo, the true word sect from Onoji taking over, or Onji taking over Enrakuji temple. All right, so it says, Thus the doctrines of the true word, Zen and Nembutsu schools spread and prospered in Japan. Eventually, Takahira, the retired emperor of Oki, who was the 82nd sovereign, began making efforts to overthrow the acting administrator. Since he was the sovereign, the leader of the nation, people supposed that, even without assistance, it would be as easy as a lion pouncing on a hare or a hawk seizing a pheasant. Moreover, for a period of several years, appeals had been made to Mount Hiei, the temples of Onji and Onjoji, and the 7 major temples of Nara, as well as to the sun goddess, great Bodhisattva Hachiman, and the deities of Sano, Kamo, and Kasuga shrines, asking that the emperor's enemies be subdued and that the gods lend their aid. Yet when war broke out, the imperial forces were not able to hold out for more than 2 or 3 days. In the end, the 3 retired emperors were exiled to the provinces of Sato, Awa, and Oki, respectively, where their lives came to a close. Moreover, not only was the prelate of Amuro, who was leading the prayers to subdue the enemies of the court, driven out of Toji Temple, but his favorite, the page Setaka, who was as dear to him as his very eyes, was beheaded. Thus, as the Lotus Sutra says, the curses in the end rebound upon the originator, which means when you do really bad things, it all comes back to you. But this is a trifling matter compared to what is to come. Hereafter, I have no doubt that the officials and the countless common people of Japan will, without exception, suffer a fate like that of heaps of dry grass to which a torch has been set, or like huge mountains crumbling and valleys being filled up, for our country will be attacked by enemies from abroad. Going from where we were last week. I, Nichiren, am the only one in the whole of the country of Japan who understands why these things will happen. So he's predicting what will happen to Japan. We already know it took a while longer for this kind of devastation to occur, but of all the countries in the world, Japan's the only place that's ever suffered nuclear attack. Okay, so he says, I, Nichiren, am the only one in the whole country of Japan who understands why these things will happen. But if I speak out, I will be treated as King Chao of the Yin dynasty treated Pekan, tearing open his chest, as King Xie of the Xie dynasty treated Quan Longfeng, cutting off his head, or as King Damira treated the venerable Arashima, beheading him. I will be banished like the priest Chu Tao Sheng, or branded on the face like the Tripitaka master Fa Tao. In the Lotus Sutra, however, it is written, we care nothing for our bodies or lives, but are anxious only for the unsurpassed way. And the Nirvana Sutra warns, it is like a royal envoy who would rather, even though it costs him his life in the end, conceal none of the words of his ruler. If in this present existence, Nichiren says, I am fearful for my life, I am so fearful for my life that I fail to speak out, then in what future existence will I ever attain Buddhahood? So what does he say there? Please read. We're really getting into the depth now. Okay, this is where Nichiren is going to start really making the point. He's been giving you all of this information on the front end to say, this is why what I'm saying now, about to say, is so profoundly correct. So what did he say right there? If in this present existence I am so fearful for my life that I fail to speak out, then in what future existence will I ever attain Buddhahood? What is he saying to you as his follower? In that sentence. If you begrudge your life, don't expect to attain Buddhahood. Okay? That's really it. Those that attain Buddhahood in their present form always take on whatever challenges before them without fear or without hesitation. All right? So he's saying, what future existence will I ever attain Buddhahood? In other words, you'll never attain Buddhahood as long as you're afraid. All right? Or in what future existence will I ever be able to bring salvation to my parents and my teacher? As much as you may lament that you want to help people that are suffering or that are reflecting bad karma, how can you ever do that if you don't attain enlightenment? You cannot. All right? So, he's saying if you want to help the people that you love, you must attain Buddhahood as well. But what lifetime can you ever do it then? You got to do it now. With thoughts such as these uppermost in my mind, Nichiren says, I decided that I must begin to speak out. That's why he started preaching this teaching. All right? And just as I expected, I was ousted, I was vilified, I was attacked, and I suffered wounds. Finally, on the 12th day of the 5th month of the first year of the Kocho era, the year with the cyclical sign Kanoto Tori, having incurred the wrath of the authorities, I was banished to the province of Izu. Eventually, on the 22nd day of the 2nd month of the 3rd year of Kocho, cyclical sign Mizunoto I, I was pardoned, allowed to return. After that, I became more determined than ever to attain enlightenment and continued to speak out. Accordingly, the difficulties I encountered became increasingly severe, like great waves that rise up in a gale. I experienced with my own body the kind of attacks with sticks and staves the Bodhisattva, never disparaging, suffered in ancient times. He could relate to that only because he had studied to understand what he would encounter on the path to Buddhahood. That's why we're reading this now. Okay? To flag in your mind what to be prepared for. Don't be freaked out when shit happens. He's saying shit happened to everybody, not just me. And he's going to requalify that. He says, it would seem that even the persecution suffered by the monk realization of virtue in the latter age after the passing of the Buddha, joy increasing, could not compare to my trials. Nowhere in all the 66 provinces and the 2 offshore islands of Japan, not for a day, not for an hour, could I find a place to rest in safety. Even sages who persevere in their practice as earnestly as did Rahula in ancient times, strictly observing all the 250 precepts, or men who are as wise as Purna, speak evil of Nichiren when they encounter him. Even worthies who are as honest and upright as the court officials Wei Qing and Fujiwara no Yoshifusa, when they see Nichiren, forsake reason and treat him unjustly. How much more so is this the case with the ordinary people of the day? They behave like dogs who have seen a monkey, or hunters in pursuit of a deer. Throughout the whole of Japan, there is not a single person who says, perhaps this man has some reason for his behavior. Okay? He says, but the reason they don't is because I piss them off, because wherever I go, I speak the truth. He says, but that is only to be expected. He says, throughout the whole of Japan, there is not a single person who says, perhaps this man has some reason for his behavior. But that is only to be expected, for whenever I come upon a person who recites the Nimbutsu, I tell him that those who believe in the Nimbutsu will fall into the hell of incessant suffering. Whenever I come upon a person who honors the true word teachings, I tell him that the true word is an evil doctrine that will destroy the nation. And to the ruler of the nation who honors the Zen school, I declare that Zen is the invention of the heavenly devil. Since I willingly bring these troubles upon myself by speaking the truth in the latter day, when others vilify me, I do not rebuke them. Even if I wanted to rebuke them, there are too many of them. And even when they strike me, I feel no pain, for I have been prepared for their blows from the very beginning. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. All right. So he says, and so I went about with ever increasing vigor and ever less concern for my safety, trying to persuade others to change their ways. As a result, several hundred Zen priests, several thousand Nimbutsu believers, and even more true word teachers went to the magistrate of the men of powerful families, or to their wives or their widows who were lay nuns, and filled their ears with endless slanders concerning me. Finally, all were convinced that I was the gravest offender in the entire nation, for it was said that in my capacity as a priest, I was saying prayers and spells for the destruction of Japan, and that I had reported that the late lay priests Semiyoji and Gokurakuji had fallen into the hell of incessant suffering. Those widows who were lay nuns insisted that the investigation was unnecessary. Rather, I should have my head cut off at once, and my disciples should likewise be beheaded or exiled to distant lands or placed in confinement. So infuriated were they that their demands for punishment were not immediately carried out. On the night of the 12th day of the 9th month of the 8th year of Bunei, 1271 cyclical sign Kanoto Hisuji, I was to have been beheaded at Tatsunokuchi in the province of Sagami. But for some reason the execution was postponed, and that night I was taken to a place called Eichi. On the night of the 13th day, people made a great uproar, saying that I had been pardoned. But again, for reasons that are unclear, I was ordered into exile in the province of Sado. While people speculated from one day to the next if I would be beheaded, I passed 4 years on Sado. Then on the 14th day of the 2nd month of the 11th year of Bunei, cyclical sign Inu, I was pardoned. On the 26th day of the 3rd month of the same year, I returned to Kamakura, and on the 8th day of the 4th month, I met with Heino Seimin. I reported on various matters and informed him that the Mongols would certainly invade Japan within that year. Then on the 12th day of the night of the 5th month, I left Kamakura and came to this mountain where I am now living. So how long after he got back from Sado did he hang around before he went to Minobu? Like about 3 months. Mm-hmm. 3 months, he tried to get them to listen to him again. He advised them that you're about ready, the shit's about to hit the fan, you're going to get invaded by the Mongols, and then he took off and established the hermitage at Minobu. He says, all these things I have done solely to repay the debt. All these things I have done solely to repay the debt I owe to my parents, the debt I owe to my teacher, the debt I owe to the 3 treasures of Buddhism, and the debt I owe to my country. Okay? So if you don't have a sense of debt to your parents, to your teacher, to the 3 treasures of Buddhism, not just to the 3 treasures of Buddhism, to your parents, absolutely. You must have a sense of gratitude to them, a sense of respect, a sense of filiality in that you want to repay that debt of gratitude. You want to save them from the suffering of not practicing the correct teaching in this lifetime, right? You want to always be the conduit to them and the correct teaching. The same thing for any of your teachers. Okay? You have that sense of appreciation that goes back to the beginning of your life. All your teachers, ultimately, the first teacher is what led to the second teacher and the third teacher and so forth. Everything is connected. Nothing is outside of other things, okay? He says, and then also a debt to your country. So you should be taking this process of the attainment of Buddhahood as a process of the attainment of Buddhahood, not just for yourself, but for everybody that you can share it with. All right? All these things I have done solely to repay the debt I owe to my parents, the debt I owe to my teacher, and the debt I owe to the 3 treasures of Buddhism, and the debt I owe to my country. For their sake, I have been willing to destroy my body and to give up my life, though, as it turns out, I have not been put to death after all. He was completely prepared to be. If a worthy man makes 3 attempts to warn the rulers of the nation and they still refuse to heed his advice, then he should retire to a mountain forest. This has been the custom from ages past, and I have accordingly followed it. I am quite certain that the merit I have acquired through my efforts is recognized by everyone from the 3 treasures on down to Brahma, Chakra, and the gods of the sun and the moon. So what's that say about you? Are those efforts only recognized of him because of who he is? No, it's every practitioner that follows in his footsteps and embraces this the way he's saying to embrace it also is quite certain of the fact that their merit will be known and be reflected in their future existence. I am quite certain that the merit that I have acquired through my efforts, not as a gift, is recognized by everyone from the 3 treasures on down to Brahma, Chakra, and the gods of the sun and the moon. That's why they listen when you pray. Through this merit, I will surely lead to the enlightenment of my parents and my teacher, the late Dozenbo. So even though he begins by saying, yeah, you really can't say what's going to happen to people that don't make the right causes, he qualifies at the end as far as he's concerned. He's quite certain that his efforts, his causes, will lead those that haven't had a direct connection to those actions in the same direction that it's directed him. Okay? So you must understand, if your parents never chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo a single time, it doesn't matter so long as you do. Your teacher, your teachers, do you understand what he's saying? He's saying Dozenbo's not out of this. Thanks to me, Dozenbo's got a finger in. Thanks to me, my teachers have. Thanks to me, the 3 treasures of Buddhism, everything. He says so. He says, but there are certain doubts. He says, I will surely lead to, through this merit, I will surely lead to enlighten my parents and my teacher, the late Dozenbo. But there are certain doubts that trouble me. The Venerable Magdagalyana attempted to save his mother, Shodainyo, but he could not do so, and she remained in the realm of hungry spirits. The monk Sunakashatra was a son of the world-honored one of great enlightenment, and yet he fell into the Avicii hell. Thus, although one may exert one's full effort to save others, it is very difficult to save them from the karmic retribution that they have brought upon themselves. The late Dozenbo treated me as one of his favorite disciples, so I cannot believe that he bore any hatred toward me. But he was a timid man, and he could never bring himself to give up his position at the temple where he lived, Seichoji. Moreover, he was fearful of what Kaganobu, the steward of the region, might do if he gave ear to my teachings. And at Seichoji, he had to live in the midst of priests like Inchi and Jisujo, who were as evil as Devadatta or Kokolika, and to put up with their intimidations, so that he became more fearful than ever. As a result, he turned a deaf ear to the longtime disciples he was fondest of. I wonder what will become of such a man in the next life. There is one thing to be thankful for. Kaganobu, Inchi, and Jitsujo all died before Dozenbo did, and that was something of a help. These men all met an untimely death because of the chastisement of the 10 demon daughters who protect the Lotus Sutra. After they died, Dozenbo began to have some faith in the Lotus Sutra, but was rather like obtaining a stick after the fight is over, or lighting a lantern at midday. The proper time had already passed. In addition, whatever happens, one ought to feel pity and concern for one's own children or disciples. Dozenbo was not an entirely helpless man, and yet, though I was exiled all the way to the province of Sato, he never once tried to visit me. This is hardly the behavior of one who believes in the Lotus Sutra. In spite of all that, I thought a great deal of him, and when I heard the news of his death, I felt as though I had to walk through fire or wade through water. I must rush to his grave, pound on it, and recite a volume of the Lotus Sutra for his sake. However, it often happens with worthies that, although they do not think of themselves of having retired from the world, other people assume that they have, and therefore, if they were to come rushing out of retreat for no good reason, people would suppose that they have failed to accomplish their purpose. For this reason, no matter how much I might wish to visit his grave, I feel that I cannot do so. Now you two, Jokinbo and Gijobo, were my teachers in my youth. You are like the administrators of priests Gonzo and Gohyo, who, though they were at some time the teachers of the great teacher Dengyo, later instead became his disciples. When Kagenobu was bent on harming me, and I decided that I must leave Mount Kiyosumi, on which Seitoji is located, you helped me escape in secret. You have performed an unrivaled service for the Lotus Sutra in helping me escape, making sure that I'm still alive. There can be no doubt about the reward that awaits you in your next rebirth. Question. Within the 8 volumes and 28 chapters that constitute the entirety of the Lotus Sutra, what part represents the true heart of the work? Answer. This is important. The answer. The heart of the Flower Garland Sutra is the title, Great and Vast Buddha Flower Garland Sutra. The heart of the Agama Sutra is the title, Medium Length Agama Sutra, as spoken by the Buddha. The heart of the Great Collection Sutra is the title, Great Correct and Equal Great Collection Sutra. The heart of the Wisdom Sutra is the title, Great Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. The heart of the 2-volume sutra is the title, Buddha Infinite Life Sutra, as spoken by the Buddha. The heart of the Meditation Sutra is the title, Meditation on the Buddha Infinite Life Sutra, as spoken by the Buddha. The heart of the Amida Sutra is the title, Amida Sutra, as spoken by the Buddha. The heart of the Nirvana Sutra is the title, Mahaparinirvana Sutra. It is the same with all the sutras. The Daimoku, or title of the sutra, which appears before the opening words, "This is what I heard," is in all cases the true heart of the sutra. This is the case whether it is a Mahayana Sutra or a Hinayana Sutra. As for the Mahavajracana Sutra, the Diamond Crown Sutra, and the Sudasikara Sutra, and so forth, in all cases the title constitutes the heart. The same is true of the Buddhas. The Thus Come One Mahavajracana Sun Moon, Bright Buddha, Burning Torch Buddha, Great Universal Wisdom Excellence Buddha, Cloud Thunder Sound King Buddha. In the case of all these Buddhas, the name itself contains within it all the various virtues that pertain to that particular Buddha. The same then applies to the Lotus Sutra. The 5 characters, Myoho Rengekyo, that appear before the opening words, "This is what I heard," comprise the true heart of the 8 volumes of the work. Moreover, they are the heart of all the sutras, as well as the correct teaching that stands above all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the people of the 2 vehicles, and all of the heavenly and human beings, asuras, and dragon deities. You all understand? Everybody's with me, right? Okay, question. If one person should chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo without understanding its meaning, and another person should chant the words Namu Daihokyo Butsu, pardon me. Again, I just got it again in front of me. And another person should chant the words Namu Daihoko Butsu Keigen Kyo, devotion to the great and vast Buddha Flower Garland Sutra. Because Keigen Sutra is the Flower Garland Sutra, right? Without understanding their meaning, Would the merit acquired by the two persons be equal, or would one acquire greater merit than the other? So he's saying if you're just going to use the title as the daimoku with the flower garland versus lotus, how would that stack up? He's saying answer. One would acquire greater merit than the other. They would not be equal, he says, is the answer. Question, why do you say so? Answer, a small river can accommodate the water flowing into it from dew, brooks, wells, ditches, and little streams, but it cannot accommodate the water from a big river. A big river can accommodate the water from a small river with its dew, brooks, and so forth, but it cannot accommodate the water from the great ocean. Now, the Agama Sutras are like the small rivers with its wells, streams, brooks, and dew, while the sutras of the correct and equal period, the Amida Sutra, the Mahayavachana Sutra, and the Flower Garland Sutra, are like the big river, which accommodates the small river. But the Lotus Sutra is like the great ocean that can hold all the water from dew, brooks, wells, streams, small rivers, big rivers, and the rains from heaven without losing a single drop. Suppose that a person is burning with fever. If he sits down beside a large body of cold water and stays there for a while, his fever will abate. But if he lies down beside a little body of water, he will continue to suffer as before. In the same way, if an ichkantika, or person of incorrigible disbelief who has committed the 5 cardinal sins and has slandered the law, should try to cool himself beside the little bodies of water that are the Agama, Flower Garland, Meditation, and Mahayavachana Sutras, the raging fever caused by his great offenses would never be dispelled. But if he should lie down in the great snowy mountain that is the Lotus Sutra, then the raging fever caused by the 5 cardinal sins, his slander of the law, and his incorrigible disbelief would be dispelled instantly. Therefore, ignorant people should by all means have faith in the Lotus Sutra, for although one may think that all titles of the sutras are the same in effect, and that it is easy to chant one, it is as easy to chant one as another. In fact, the merit acquired even by an ignorant person who chants the title of the Lotus Sutra is as far superior to that acquired by a wise person who chants some other title as heaven is to earth. To illustrate, even a person with great strength cannot break a strong rope with his bare hands. But if one has a little knife, then even a person of meager strength can sever the rope with ease. Even a person with great strength cannot cut through a piece of hard stone with a dull sword. But if one has a sharp sword, then even a person of meager strength can cut the stone in two. Or to give another example, even though one may not know what is in this... Or to give another example, even though one may not know what is in the medicine, if one takes a dose of it, one's illness can be cured. But if one takes only ordinary food, one's illness will never be cured. Or to give yet another example, an elixir can actually increase one's lifespan, whereupon ordinary medicine, though it can cure illness, can never prolong one's life. Question: of the 28 chapters of the Lotus Sutra, which is the heart? Which is the most essential? Answer: some would say that each chapter is essential to the matter that is, Some would say that each chapter is essential to the matter that it deals with. Some would contend that the expedient means and lifespan chapters are the heart. Others that the expedient means alone is the heart, or that the lifespan alone is the heart. Some would say that the heart is the passage telling how the Buddhas open the door of the Buddha wisdom to all living beings, show it, cause them to awaken to it, and induce them to enter into its path. Others that the passage on the true aspect of all phenomena is the heart. Question: okay, Nichiren, what is your opinion? Answer: I believe that the words Nam-myoho Renge-kyo constitute the heart. What is your proof? Is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo in any chapter of the Lotus Sutra? No. Okay, he says, he's going to explain that now. Mm-hmm. What is your proof? Answer: the fact that Ananda, Manjushri, and others wrote, this is what I heard. Question: what do you mean by that? Over a period of 8 years, Ananda, Manjushri, and the others listened to the immeasurable meanings of the Lotus Sutra, never missing a single phrase. a single verse, a single word. Yet, after the Buddha had passed away, at the time of the compilation of his teachings, when the 999 arhats took up their writing brushes and dipped them in ink, they first of all wrote Myoho Rengekyo. And after that, they intoned the words, "This is what I heard." Therefore, the 5 characters of Myoho Rengekyo must be the heart of the 8 volumes and 28 chapters that compose the work, because each chapter begins with Myoho Rengekyo, right? Must they not? Therefore, the Dharma teacher Fa Yin of Quan Che Su Temple, who is said to have lectured on the Lotus Sutra ever since the distant age of the Sun Moon Bright Buddha, states the words, "This is what I heard," indicate that one is going to transmit the doctrines one has heard preached. The title which precedes these words sums up the sutra as a whole. The great teacher Tentai, who was present on Eagle Peak when the Lotus Sutra was preached and heard it in person, writes, "The word 'this' of 'this is what I heard' indicates the essence of a doctrine heard from the Buddha." And the great teacher Chang'an writes, the transcriber, Chang'an, comments on Tentai's explanation of the title of the Lotus Sutra, saying, hence his explanation of the title in the preface conveys the profound meaning of the sutra. The profound meaning indicates the heart of the text. Everybody's still with me, right? Mm-hmm. He's giving a very fortified, intricate, correct answer here. In this passage, because it's still about what do you consider to be the heart? I consider Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to be the heart, not Myoho Renge-kyo to be the heart. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to be the heart. Why? It's the latter day of the law. It's the time of the Buddhism of the sowing. Okay, that's what he's trying to explain. I am the thus come one of the original enlightenment. In this passage, the heart of the text signifies that the daimoku, the title of the text, is the heart of the Lotus Sutra. Okay, at the top of page 732. Everybody's with me, right? Mm-hmm. As the great teacher Myolo states, it is the heart of the Lotus Sutra that encompasses all the doctrines preached by the Buddha in the course of his lifetime. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. Okay, so all the teachings of the Buddha during the Buddha's lifetime are contained within Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That's what that just said. That's why that's the correct teaching. That's the correct mantra to embrace. India comprises 70 states, but they are known collectively by the name India. Japan comprises 60 provinces, but they are known collectively by the name Japan. Within the name India are contained all the 70 states as well as all their people, animals, treasures, and so forth. Within the name Japan are contained all the 66 provinces, the feathers sent as tribute from Dewa, the gold of the province of Mutsa, and all the other treasures of the nation, as well as the people, as well as the people and animals and temples and shrines, are contained within the 2 characters that form the name Japan. Everything that's in Japan is contained within the name Japan. Just like everything contained within the entire lifetime of the Buddha's teachings are contained within Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. One who possesses the heavenly eye, one who's attained actual Ichinen Sanzen, can look at the 2 characters of the name Japan and see all the 66 provinces along with their people and animals, can see dependent origination in its entirety. All right? One who possesses the Dharma eye can see all the people and animals now dying in one place, now being born in another place. It is like hearing someone's voice and knowing what the person must look like, or seeing someone's footprints and judging whether the person is large or small. It is like estimating the size of a pond by looking at the lotuses that grow in it, or imagining the size of the dragons by observing the rain that they cause to fall. Each of these examples illustrates the principle that all things are expressed in one. All things are expressed in one. It might appear from this that the daimoku, or title, of any Agama Sutra must contain all of the teachings of the Buddhas, but in fact it contains only one Buddha, the Shakyamuni of the Hinayana teachings. This is a very important part to keep in mind here. Pay real close attention to this next paragraph, all right? I'll say it again. It might appear from this, what I've already said, that the Daimoku or title from any Agama Sutra must contain all of the teachings of the Buddhas. But in fact, it contains only the Buddha Shakyamuni of the Hinayana teachings. It might also appear that the titles of the Flower Garland, Meditation, and Mahevrochana Sutras must contain all the teachings of the Buddhas. But in fact, they do not include the doctrines concerning the attainment of Buddhahood by persons of the two vehicles, or the Shakyamuni Buddha who gained enlightenment in the far distant past. Do you understand what he's saying? All right, so he's saying, okay, what did he just talk about there? He talked about the Flower Garland, Meditation, Mahevrochana Sutras must contain all this. But do they contain the enlightenment of people of the two vehicles? No, that's only in the Lotus Sutra. So he's saying, no, those daimokus, those titles don't contain the essence of all, the heart of all teachings. That's why he's explaining it's the heart of the Lotus Sutra only of all the sutras that can be said to contain the entirety of the essence of all of Shakyamuni's teachings. Let me continue. Did I lose you?
Not the two vehicles. Only
The
one.
two. No, the two vehicles are only contained within the Lotus Sutra. So it's saying the Daimoku of the Flower Garland Sutra couldn't contain that teaching. Do you understand? Because it doesn't exist in the Flower Garland Sutra. Do you understand? There are certain things that only exist as a teaching in the Lotus Sutra. The attainment of Buddhahood by women, by evil people, by people of the two vehicles, by people of incorrigible disbelief. Right? Evil people.
So all the other ones that don't.
They don't say that. No, you attain Buddhahood over the course of many lifetimes in all the other ones. Only
In the
Lotus do you have the ability to attain it in a single lifetime. Mahevrochana says you can, but that's stolen from Nichiren Sons and from Tintai. Okay, it's not really in any of the true word teachings. You can go read the Sukukara and the Mahevrochana and the whatever. It's not in there. That's what he just qualified. Okay, so let me start again. The last paragraph on 732, but I said this is important. It might appear from this that the Daimoku or title of any Agama Sutra must contain all of the teachings of the Buddhas, but in fact it contains only one Buddha, the Shakyamuni of the Hinayana teachings. Okay, because that's when he got into do this and don't do that, right? What was the first thing that he preached after he came out of his meditation under the Bodhi tree? The Kegon Sutra, the Flower Garland Sutra. But who is the Buddha of the Flower Garland Sutra? Is it Shakyamuni? No, it's Vairocana's Buddha. Okay? They're not that's not Shakyamuni. Shakyamuni's telling the story of Vairocana's Sutra, Buddha in the Flower Garland Sutra. Do you understand? That's the whole point. When we get to the Amida Sutras, when we talk about Nimbutsu, what's the Buddha revered there? Is it Shakyamuni? No, it's Amida. Okay? When we get to True Word, are they revering Shakyamuni? No, they're revering Mahevrochana Buddha. This is the point that he's making. These other Daimoku titles don't contain this essence because they don't contain the teaching that allows it to be the essence. Only the Lotus Sutra does. That's what he's saying. Now listen to what I'm reading. He says, it might appear from this that the Daimoku or title of any Agama Sutra must contain all the teachings of the Buddhas, because it came from Shakyamuni, right? It's the teachings of all the Buddhas. No, but in fact it contains only one Buddha, the Shakyamuni of the Hinayana. Because remember when I wrote, when they talk about Shakyamuni Buddha, you have to listen, which Shakyamuni Buddha are you talking about? Are you talking about Shakyamuni of the theoretical teaching? Nichiren and Tintai and Dingyo all write as though those are three different potentialities. Okay, they're not a guy. This is the point. Okay? They're not a guy. That's the point. The Shakyamuni or the Shakyamuni of the essential teaching, or the Shakyamuni hidden in the depths of the 16th chapter. That's the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo Deskam 1. That's not Shakyamuni of the theoretical teaching. Do you understand? That's what he's really getting ready to qualify. He's trying to get to the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo Deskam 1. That's what he's boiling down here. Let me just keep reading. It might also appear that the titles of the Flower Garland, Meditation, and Mahavajrana Sutras must contain all the teachings of the Buddhas, but in fact they do not include the doctrine concerning the attainment of Buddhahood by persons of the two vehicles, or the Shakyamuni Buddha who attained enlightenment in the far distant past of the essential teaching, right? They are like flowers that bloom but are followed by no fruit. Thunder that rolls but brings no rain, a drum that has no sound, eyes that cannot see, a woman who bears no child, or a person who has no life or spirit, because it's now the latter day of the law, and it's time for the Lotus Sutra to appear as the supreme teaching as taught by the original teacher. Okay? The mantras associated, the mantras, okay, the things that you chant, the mantras associated with the Buddha's Mahavajrana, medicine master, and Amida, and Bodhisattva perceiver of the world sounds are of the same nature. Though in the various sutras containing these mantras, they are said to be like a great king, Mount Sumeru, the sun and moon, good medicine, a wish-granting jewel, or a sharp sword. They are far beneath the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, as mud is beneath the clouds. Please understand, this is Nichiren Daishonin telling you this, okay? That's why he wrote this letter to those two senior priests, is to make sure this got to you, ultimately. So do understand, he's clarifying. There is nothing compared to what I'm writing right now. There's nothing compared to what I'm writing right now that isn't a comparison of mud to clouds in the sky. All right? Not only are they vastly inferior, but all of them have lost their respective inherent functions, because it's now the latter day of the law. It's no longer the appropriate time. That's what he was just saying about Dozenbo waiting too long to rebuke the slander of his teachers. You get it? When the sun comes up, the light of the crowds, when the sun comes up, the light of the crowds of the stars is completely eclipsed. But when bits of iron are placed near a magnet, they lose their property. When a great sword is exposed to even a small fire, it ceases to be of any use. When cow's milk or donkey's milk comes into the presence of a lion king's milk, it turns to water. A pack of foxes will forget all their tricks if they meet up with a dog. A band of dogs will quake with fright if they encounter a small tiger. In the same way, if one chants Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, then the power of the words Namu Amida Butsu, the power of the mantras invoking Mahavajrana, the power of Bodhisattva perceiver of the world sounds, and the power of all the Buddhas, all the sutras, and all the Bodhisattvas without exception vanish before the power of Myoho Renge-kyo. You understand? Okay. It's not to say have no power, but they don't. All right? Unless these other sutras manage to borrow the power of Myoho Renge-kyo, they will all become worthless things. This is a fact that stands before our very eyes in the present age, in the absence of any proof of actual fact. Because I, Nichiren, chant and spread Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the power of Namu Amida Butsu will be like a moon waning, a tide running out, grass withering in autumn and winter, or ice melting in the sun. Watch and see, he says. Watch and see. Question: if this law that you have been describing is in fact so wonderful, why is it not better known? Why have not Mahakashayapa, Ananda, Ashvagosha, Nagarjuna, Asanga, Vasubandhu, Nanye, Tiantai, Myolo, and Dengyo spread it abroad the way Shantao spread the practice of reciting Namu Amida Butsu throughout China, or the way Ishin, Yokan, and Honen spread it in Japan, turning the whole country into worshippers of Amida Buddha? Answer: this is an old criticism, not by any means one that is raised here for the first time. He's saying, if you've never heard of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the people have been saying this since the very beginning. There's a very good reason why it hasn't been brought forth until now. Bodhisattva, Ashvagosha, and Nagarjuna were great scholars who lived respectively 600 and 700 years after the passing of Shakyamuni Buddha. When these men appeared in the world and began spreading the doctrines of the Mahayana Sutras, the various followers of the Hinayana Sutras raised objections. Mahakashayapa and Ananda, they said, lived on the 20 or 40 years after the passing of the Buddha, preaching the correct teaching, because they started out preaching Hinayana, right? He's saying, presumably they conveyed the heart of all the teachings of the Buddha that the Buddha had propounded during his lifetime. Now we find that these two men emphasized they were simply the concept of suffering, emptiness, impermanence, and non-self. They were just easy to grasp concepts of the agamas. Ashvagosha and Nagarjuna may be very wise, but are we to suppose that they are superior to Mahakashayapa and Ananda? This is our first objection, those people said then. Do you understand? In objecting to the words of those people that were wiser that came after the initial teachers, Ananda and Mahakashayapa. You do understand how they're making this okay? Mahakashayapa and Ananda were during the Buddha's lifetime or shortly after, right? Ashvagosha and Nagarjuna are hundreds of years later. Everybody's with me, right? So he's saying, now, the last paragraph, page 733, first column. Mahakashayapa obtained his enlightenment through direct encounters with the Buddha. But these two men, Ashvagosha and Nagarjuna, have never encountered the Buddha. This is our second objection. Everybody's with me, right? Mm-hmm. Right. So there's two objections. Now the third. The non-Buddhist philosophers who preceded the Buddha taught that life is permanent, joyful, endowed with self, and pure. Later, when the Buddha appeared in the world, he declared in the Agamas that life is marked by suffering, emptiness, impermanence, and non-self, and that it takes many lifetimes to attain Buddhahood. Now, Ashvagosha and Nagarjuna, they're starting to preach the Mahayana Sutras, insist that it is permanent, joyful, endowed with self, and pure. This being so, we must suppose that, since both the Buddha and Mahakashayapa have passed away from the world, the devil king of the sixth heaven has taken possession of these two men and is trying to overthrow the teachings of Buddhism and replace them with the teachings of non-Buddhists. Okay, that's the way the people of the Theravadins always have treated Mahayana Buddhism. All right? Everybody that's taken a step forward in this progression has always been labeled as wrong initially. Everyone, from Nagarjuna and Ashvagosha to Tiantai. We've already read all this. Tiantai, Dingyo, they were all attacked. Not just Nichiren. That's his point. If that is so, then these men are the enemies of Buddhism. We must smash their skulls, cut off their heads, put an end to their lives, see that they get no more to eat. Let us drive them from the country. This is all parenthetical. So he's quoting those previous believers of the Hinayana Sutras, the teachers that immediately came after Shakyamuni passed. Such were the declarations of the Hinayana believers. I didn't know I was going to say that. And Ashvagosha and Nagarjuna, each having only a few allies, were forced day and night to listen to these shouts of calumny, and morning and evening to bear the attacks of sticks and staves. But these two men were in fact messengers of the Buddha. For in the Maya Sutra, it is predicted that Ashvagosha will appear 600 years and Nagarjuna 700 years after the Buddha's passing. The same prediction is also recorded in the Lankavatara Sutra and of course in the Buddha's successor sutra as well. But the Hinayana believers would not heed these predictions and instead attacked the Mahayanas blindly and without reason. Since hatred and jealousy abound even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more so will this be after his passing? Continue, says the Lotus Sutra, continuing on 734. We're only a couple pages away from being done. Looking at the time of Ashvaghosha and Nagarjuna, one begins to have little understanding of what these words of the sutra really mean. Pardon me, have a little. Look, okay, let me go back. Last sentence on page 733. Since hatred and jealousy abound even when the thus come one is in the world, how much more so will this be after his passing, says the Lotus Sutra. Looking at the time of Ashvaghosha and Nagarjuna, one begins to have a little understanding of what these words of the sutra really mean. Moreover, Bodhisattva Aradeva was killed by a non-Buddhist, and the venerable Arashima had his head cut off. These events too give one cause for thought. Then, some 1,500 or more years after the passing of the Buddha, in the country of China, which lies east of India, the great teacher Tentai appeared in the world during the years of the Qin and Sui dynasties. He declared that among the sacred teachings put forth by the thus come one were the Mahayana and Hinayana, the exoteric and the esoteric, the provisional and the true. Mahakashayapa and Ananda had concentrated on spreading the Hinayana teachings, he explained. Ashvaghosha, Nagarjuna, Asanga, and Vasubandhu had spread the provisional Mahayana teachings. But with regard to true Mahayana teachings of the Lotus Sutra, they had merely touched on it briefly, but concealed its meaning, or had described the surface meaning of the sutra, but failed to discuss the whole range of the Buddhist teachings expounded throughout his lifetime, or they had described the theoretical teaching but not the essential teaching, or they had understood the theoretical and essential teachings but not the teachings for observing the mind. When the great teacher Tentai, everybody's with me, right? He's qualifying. Everybody got a little bit right, but not of them got it all right because it wasn't their job to get it all right. That's my job. When the great teacher Tentai expounded these views, the millions of followers of the 10 schools of Buddhism, 3 in southern China and 7 in northern China, all with one accord gave a great laugh of derision. Here, in these latter days, a truly amazing priest has made his appearance among us, they exclaimed. Though there have at times been persons who adhered to biased views and opposed us, never has there been anyone who maintained that all the 260 or more Tripitaka masters and teachers of Buddhism who have lived since the introduction of Buddhism in the 10th year of the Yangping era of the latter Han, the year of the cyclical sign Hinoto-u, down to these present years of Qin and Sui were ignorant. And on top of that, he says that they are slanderers of the law who are destined to fall into the hell of the evil paths. Such is the kind of person that has appeared. They're talking about Tentai. You with me? All right, so, again, parenthetically, quoting them. He is so insane, Tentai. He is so insane, they complain, that he even maintains that the Tripitaka master Kumarajiva, the man who introduced the Lotus Sutra to China, was an ignorant fool. Whatever he may say about the men of China, imagine his saying that the great scholars of India, such as Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu, and the several hundred others, all of them bodhisattvas of the 4 ranks, did not teach through a true doctrine, which is what Tentai said ultimately, right? He said, this is it. All right? Anyone who killed this man would be doing no more than killing a hawk. In fact, he would be more praiseworthy than someone who kills a demon, somebody that could get rid of Tentai, the slanderer of Tentai. This is the way they railed at the great teacher Tentai. And later, in the time of the great teacher Myolo, when the Dharma characteristics and truer doctrines were introduced from India, and the flower garland school was first established in China, Myolo spoke out against these teachings and was met with a similar uproar. In Japan, the great teacher Dengyo made his appearance 1,800 years after the Buddha had passed away. After examining the commentaries of of Tentai, he began to criticize the 6 schools that had flourished in Japan in the 260 or more years since the time of the Emperor Kimei. People in turn slandered him, saying that the Brahmanists who lived in the time of the Buddha or the Taoists of China must have been reborn in Japan, speaking of Dengyo. Dengyo also proposed to set up an ordination platform for administering the great precepts of perfect and immediate enlightenment, such as had never existed in India, China, or Japan in the 1800 years since the Buddha's passing. Indeed, he went further than this, declaring that the ordination platform at Kanonji Temple in the western region of Tsukushi, the ordination platform at Onodera Temple in the eastern province of Shimotsuke, and the ordination platform at Todaiji Temple in the central province of Yamato all stank with the foul odor of the Hinayana precepts and were as worthless as broken tile and rubble. And the priests who upheld such precepts, he said, were no better than foxes and monkeys. Okay? This is obviously before the great debate where he kicked everybody's butt. In reply, his critics exclaimed, "Ah, how amazing! This thing that looks like a priest." Speaking of Dengyo now. In reply, his critics exclaimed, "Ah, how amazing! This thing that looks like a priest must in fact be a great swarm of locusts that has appeared in Japan and is about to gobble up the tender shoots of Buddhism in one swoop. Or perhaps Chao of the Yin dynasty or Chie of the Shi has been reborn in Japan in the shape of this priest. Pension's Emperor Wu of the northern Chao and Emperor Wu Tsung of the Tang dynasty have reappeared in the world. At any moment now, Buddhism may be wiped out and the nation overthrown. As for the ordinary people, they clap their hands in alarm and wag their tongues, saying, whenever the priests of the 2 types of Buddhism, Mahayana and Hinayana, appear together, they fight like the Lord Chakra and the Asuras, or like Swing Yu and Kao Tzu, disputing possession of the kingdom. Dengyo's opponents continued to revile him, saying, in the time of the Buddha, there were 2 ordination platforms. One belonging to the Buddha and the other to Devadatta, and a number of people were killed in the dispute over them. This man may well defy the other schools, but he declares that he must set up an ordination platform for administering the precepts of perfect and immediate enlightenment, such as even his master, the great teacher Tentai, was unable to establish. How strange and how frightening, how frightening. But Dengyo had his passages of scripture to support him. And as you know, the Mahayana ordination platform was eventually set up and has been in existence for some time now on Mount Hiei. Thus, although their enlightenment may have been the same, this is what he's concluding from all of this. Thus, although their enlightenment may have been the same from the point of view of the teaching that they propagated, because they're serving as functions of the law when they live the life of the Buddha, right? Buddhahood is something that's shared by all Buddhists. It's not different for each Buddha. Do you understand? Okay? So, he's saying, thus, although their enlightenment may have been the same, from the point of view of the teaching that they propagated, Ashvaghosha and Nagarjuna were superior to Mahakashayapa and Ananda. Tentai was superior to Ashvaghosha and Nagarjuna, and Dengyo surpassed Tentai. Woo. In these latter times, people's wisdom becomes shallow, while the Buddhist teachings become more profound. To give an analogy, a mild illness can be cured with ordinary medicine, but a severe illness requires an elixir. A man who is weak must have strong allies to help him. Question: is there a correct teaching that was not propagated even by Tentai and Dengyo? Answer: yes, there is. Question, what sort of teaching is it? Answer, this is all the whole reason you read this whole thing. Answer, it consists of 3 things. It was left behind by the Buddha for the sake of those who live in the latter day of the law. It is the correct teaching that was never propagated by Mahakashayapa or Ananda, Ashvagosha or Nagarjuna, Tentai or Dengyo. No one but someone that lived in the latter day of the law could bring it forth. Question, what form does it take? So what did he say though? What was the first question? Is there a correct teaching that was not propagated? Now he says, what form does that correct teaching take? He's going to now say, what form does that correct teaching take? Answer, first, Japan and all the other countries throughout Jampadvipa should make the Shakyamuni Buddha of the essential teaching their object of devotion. The Shakyamuni Buddha of the essential teaching is the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one. All right, because he's not talking about the essential teaching of the last 14 chapters. He's talking about the essential teaching of Buddhism. Do you understand? The essential teaching that is expounded in the latter day. So he says, first, Japan and all the other countries throughout Jampadvipa should make the Shakyamuni Buddha of the essential teaching their object of devotion. That is what the Gohonzon is. Do you understand that? Do you understand that? That's what the Gohonzon is. In other words, the Shakyamuni and many treasures who appear in the treasure tower. Okay, so there's a separation between that thus come one and the Shakyamuni that we're talking about, right? He's saying the Shakyamuni Buddha of the essential teaching. Then he goes, in other words, the Shakyamuni and many treasures who appear in the treasure tower, all the other Buddhas and the 4 Bodhisattvas, including superior practices, all act as attendants to this Buddha. That's what's depicted on the Gohonzon, right? Shakyamuni's there, Tahoe's there, many treasures is there, you know, the 4 great bodhisattvas, you know, superior practices, boundless practices, peaceful practices, pure practices, they're all there on the top row. All the 4 heavenly kings are up, right? Everybody's there. That's the form of the teaching. It's the Gohonzon itself. So the Gohonzon is the form of the teaching. It's not Nam-myoho. Again, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo comes from the Gohonzon. Understand that. Okay, so let me read that again. It's very important. Question, what form does this teaching take? It takes the form of the Gohonzon. Question, what form does it take? First, Japan and all of the other countries throughout Jampadvipa should make the Shakyamuni Buddha of the essential teaching their object of devotion, the Gohonzon. In other words, the Shakyamuni and many treasures who appear in the treasure tower of the Lotus Sutra. All the other Buddhas and the 4 Bodhisattvas that appear in the Lotus Sutra, including superior practices, will act as attendants to this Buddha, the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come one. The original teacher. That's the point. All right? Second, there is the sanctuary of the essential teaching. Third, in Japan, China, India, and other countries of Jampadvipa, every person, regardless of whether wise or ignorant, will set aside other practices and join in the chanting of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. This teaching has never been taught before. Here, in the entire land of Jampadvipa, in all the 2,225 years since the passing of the Buddha, not a single person chanted it. Nichiren alone, without sparing his voice, now chants Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So what did he just talk about there? Did you guys pick up on what those first, second, third actually are? First is the Buddha is the same as the law, right? Mm-hmm. It's the 3 great secret laws, basically. if you think through. Okay. First, Japan and all the other countries throughout Jampadvipa should all make the Shakyamuni Buddha the essential teaching their object of devotion. In other words, all the Buddhists serve, including superior practice, will act as attendants to this Buddha. Second, there's the sanctuary. Third is the daimoku. You get it? All right, so the size of the waves depends upon the wind that raises them. So the three great secret laws were not called out as three great secret laws, but they were all listed there. Do you understand? All right, that's the teaching that was never known before in the 225 years since the Buddha's passing. That's what he's talking about. Tentai, Dengyo, nobody knew Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. I'm the thus come one Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Do you get it? All right. The size of the waves depends upon the wind that raises them. The height of the flames depends on how much firewood is piled on. The size of the lotuses depends upon the pond in which they grow, and the volume of the rain depends on the dragons that make it fall. The deeper the roots, the more prolific the branches, the farther the source, the longer the stream. The Chao dynasty lasted for 700 years because of the propriety and filial devotion of its founder, King Wen. The Qin dynasty, on the other hand, lasted hardly any time at all because of the perverse ways of its founder, the first emperor of the Qin. If Nichiren's compassion, so he's qualifying this now. Now, if what I'm saying is not BS, this is what will occur. So, and what he's predicting here has already happened, frankly speaking. If Nichiren's compassion is truly great and encompassing, in other words, if I'm correct, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo will spread for 10,000 years and more for all eternity. For it has the beneficial power to open the blind eyes of every living being in the country of Japan, and it blocks off the road that leads to the hell of incessant suffering. Its benefit surpasses that of Dengyo and Tentai and is superior to that of Nagarjuna and Mahakashayapa. 100 years of practice in the land of bliss cannot compare to the benefit gained from one day's practice in the impure world. So that's another thing we should always remember. When we're in the middle of all the BS that we call daily life, a single day of living in this BS and struggling with the BS of the Sahe world is the equivalent of 100 years of living a peaceful, tranquil life in some blissful land where there are no problems. Because this is how we manifest our Buddhahood. Yes. We use this Sahe world as the firewood to light the fire of our Buddhahood. That's why nothing compares to living the life that we live right now. We already live on heaven on earth, okay? Yes. So he says, 2,000 years of propagating Buddhism during the former and middle days of the law are inferior to an hour. 2,000 years are inferior to an hour of propagation in the latter day of the law. This is in no way because of Nichiren's wisdom, but simply because the time makes it so. In spring, the blossoms open. In autumn, the fruit appears. Summer is hot. Winter is cold. The seasons make it so, does it not? After I, the Buddha, have passed into extinction, this is parenthetical. After I have passed into extinction in the last 500-year period, you must spread it widely throughout Jampadvipa and never allow it to be cut off, nor must you allow evil devils, the devil's people, heavenly beings, dragons, yakshas, or kumbandanda, demons, to seize the advantage. He's quoting the Lotus Sutra. If this passage of the Lotus Sutra should prove to be in vain, then Shariputra will never become the thus come one flower glow. The venerable Mahakashayapa will never become the thus come one light bright. Madhyayana will never become Tamalapatra, sandalwood fragrance Buddha. Ananda will never become mountain sea wisdom, unrestricted power King Buddha. The nun Maharapati, Prajpati, will never become the Buddha gladly seen by all living beings. And the nun Yoshodhara will never become the Buddha endowed with 10,000 glowing marks. Major world system dust particle kalpas will then likewise be childish theory. Do you know what he's talking about there? Mm-hmm. When he's talking about Sanzin Jintigo, Goyaku Jintingo in the 16th chapter, right? He says major world system dust particle kalpas will likewise become childish theory, and numberless major world system dust particle kalpas will become a lie. Also will become a lie. Very likely, Shakyamuni Buddha, the Lord of Teachings, will fall into the hell of incessant suffering. Many treasures will be gasping and flames amid the flames of Vici hell. The Buddhas of the 10 directions will have their home in the 8 great hells, and all the various bodhisattvas will be forced to suffer in the 136 hells. Why? Because without Nichiren's advent and the establishment of the true teaching after the 5th 500-year period, they've all been preaching lies all this time. Understand, Nichiren's advent is the only thing that ties everything into one thing. Instead of still leaving it all strung out into a bunch of things that are diffuse. You get it? So he says, but. So he just says, this passage, okay, is true, right? He says, but how could such a thing ever be that none of these Buddhas would become Buddhas? He says, obviously that can't be. So he's saying, but how could such a thing ever be? Since the Sutra's predictions was not made in vain, since all of those Buddhas did become those Buddhas, then it is certain that all the people of Japan will chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Because that's what the sutras all say will happen. The correct teaching will be propagated. Okay? You must spread it widely throughout Jampadvipa and broadly and never let it be cut off. That's what it just said. Right? He's saying because of that, this is all true. Because of this being all true, this is true. I don't have to worry about will people chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The sutras tell me that they will. My faith tells me that they will. I've gone through all this bullshit because I believe that they will. All right? Thus the flower will return to the root, and the essence of the plant will remain in the earth. The benefit that I have been speaking of will surely accumulate to the life of the late Dozenbo. Will surely accumulate. I have no scripture to validate this, but me as the original teacher says, my estimation of the teaching is that this will accrue to Dozenbo. Just like it accrues to your parents. Just like it accrues to everybody you keep on your crew. Through the connection you establish in your life with them. Thus the flower will return to the root and the essence of the plant will remain in the earth. The benefit that I have been speaking of will surely accumulate in the life of the late Dozenbo. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Written on the 21st day of the 7th month of the 2nd year of Kinji, the cyclical sign Hino-e ni, respectfully sent from Mount Minobu to my bros Jokinbo and Gijobo. Cover letter. I have received your letter. One should never speak of matters pertaining to the Buddhist doctrine to someone who has no faith, regardless of whether the person is a close friend or a relation or a stranger. This is something you should keep in mind. I have inscribed the Gohonzon for you, even more in the years after the passing of the Buddha than during his lifetime, even more during the middle day of the law than during the former day, and now even more in the beginning of the latter day of the law than in the middle day. The enemies of the Lotus Sutra are bound to grow in power. If you understand this, you as well as anyone will realize that there is no one in Japan other than myself who is a true votary of the Lotus Sutra. A sketch report of the passing of the Reverend Dozenbo reached me last month. I felt I should go in person as quickly as possible, as well as sending the priest who bears this letter. However, though I do not think of myself as one who is retired from the world, other people seem to look at me in that way, and so I make it a rule not to leave this mountain. The priest informed me of private reports from various people that there are likely to be doctrinal debates with the other schools in the near future. I have therefore been sending people to a number of temples in the provinces in order to search out sutras and treatises from all over the country. I have sent this priest on a mission to the province of Suruga, and he has just now returned, so I am sending him with this letter. In the enclosed treatise I have written matters of the utmost importance. It would be wrong, therefore, to make the contents known to persons who do not understand the essence of Buddhism. Right? Do you understand why he just said that? Because he just now qualified some really deep stuff that unless you have faith, you're not going to understand. You're just going to slander, and you're going to lose from that slander whether you understood you were going to lose from it or not. I'm not going to have control over it, so I don't want to expose you to that liability out of compassion for you. And even if they are made known only to persons who do. If there are too many people involved, then the word of its contents is likely to reach the ears of outsiders. That would not be conducive to your welfare nor to mine. Therefore, I ask that just the two of you, you and Gijobo, have the work read aloud 2 or 3 times at the summit of Kasamagori, with this priest to do the reading. Please have him read it once before the grave of the late Dozimbo as well. After that, leave it in the possession of this priest and have him read it to you repeatedly. If you listen to it again and again, I believe you will come to understand and appreciate its meaning. Now, I think I read this in the beginning, but in case I didn't, I'm going to read the background just to get it in because I can. This lengthy treatise is one of Nichiren Daishonin's 5 major writings. It is dated the 21st day of the 7th month, 1276, a little more than 2 years after the Daishonin had taken up residence at Minobu. It was prompted by the news of the death of Dozimbo, a priest of the Seitoji Temple in Awa Province, who had been the Daishonin's teacher when he first entered the temple as a boy of 12. Nichiren Daishonin wrote this treatise to express his gratitude to Dozimbo, and sent it to Jokimbo and Gijobo, senior priests at the time he entered the temple, who later became his followers. He entrusted this text to Nikko, one of his disciples, and requested that it be taken to Seitoji on his behalf and read aloud at Kasamagori on the summit of Mount Kiyosumi, where he had first chanted Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and again in front of the tomb of his late teacher. In 1233, Nichiren Daishonin entered Seitoji Temple to study under Dozimbo. At that time, temples served as centers of learning as well as religion. During his stay at the temple, the Daishonin developed his extraordinary literary skills that later proved so valuable in propagating his teachings. He also embarked on a lifelong journey to find and proclaim the unique truth of Buddhism, which had all been but obscured by the emergence of various misleading schools. On the 28th day of the 4th month, 1253, the Daishonin proclaimed Nam-myoho Renge-kyo to be the sole teaching leading directly to the enlightenment in the latter day of the law, while denouncing the doctrines of the then prevalent Pure Land school. Tojo Kagenobu, the steward of the era and fervent Pure Land believer, became furious on hearing of this and sent his men to the temple to arrest the Daishonin. Dozimbo, a devotee of the Pure Land teaching, could not defend him openly, but instructed the 2 senior priests, Jokenbo and Gijobo, to guide his young disciple to safety. Nichiren Daishonin and his former teacher met again in 1264 when the Daishonin visited his home in Awa after returning from exile on the Izu Peninsula. He later wrote that Dozimbo had asked him on this occasion if his practice of the Pure Land teaching would lead him to the hell of incessant suffering. In reply, the teacher told Dozimbo that he could not free himself from the effects of his slander unless he revered the Lotus Sutra as the fundamental teaching. Afterward, though Dozimbo did not entirely abandon his belief in Amida, he carved a statue of Shakyamuni Buddha. The Daishonin rejoiced that Dozimbo was apparently beginning to see his error because he felt indebted to this man who had initiated him into the priesthood and had earnestly desired to lead him to the correct teaching. Nichiren Daishonin begins this treatise by emphasizing the need to repay one's obligation to one's parents, teacher, the 3 treasures of Buddhism, and one's sovereign. He teaches the importance of repaying debts of gratitude as a fundamental aspect of human behavior. Of these 4 debts of gratitude, this work stresses specifically repaying the debt owed to one's teacher. Next, the Daishonin states that to repay such debts, one must master the truth of Buddhism and attain enlightenment. To accomplish this goal, one must dedicate oneself single-mindedly to the Buddhist practice. However, to attain enlightenment, one must also practice the correct Buddhist teaching. The Daishonin traces the development of various schools of Buddhism in India, China, and Japan, and examines their doctrines in terms of the relative superiority of the sutras on which they are based, emphasizing the superiority of the Lotus Sutra. In particular, he refutes the erroneous doctrines of the True Word School. He vehemently denounces Jikaku and Chisho as though they were patriarchs of the Japanese Tendai school, corrupted the school's profound teachings, which are based on the Lotus Sutra, by mixing them with esoteric elements. The Daishonin concludes that only the Lotus Sutra contains the ultimate truth, and moreover, that the essence of the sutra and of the whole of Buddhism is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. This is the teaching to be propagated in the latter day of the law. The concluding part of this work makes clear that the Buddha of the latter day is none other than Nichiren Daishonin himself, and that the Buddhism he teaches compares the 3 great secret laws, the invocation or daimoku of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the object of devotion, and the sanctuary, which are implicit in the lifespan chapter of the Lotus Sutra, but have never been before revealed. The Daishonin also makes clear that in establishing the three great secret laws for the enlightenment of all people, he is at the same time repaying his debt of gratitude to the deceased Dozenbo. Flowering and bearing grain, written 2 years later, states the blessings that Nichiren obtains from propagating the Lotus Sutra will always return to Dozenbo. This passage restates the message of the concluding part of this letter. The present treatise is particularly important because it is the first extant writing in which Nichiren specifies each of the three great secret laws, declaring that this teaching will save people for the 10,000 years of the latter day and more for all eternity. These three, the core of the Daishonin's Buddhism, represent the law that was transferred to the Bodhisattvas of the earth in the Supernatural Powers chapter for propagation in the latter day. The object of devotion is the Gohonzon that enables all people to attain Buddhahood. The Daimoku is the chanting of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo with faith in the object of devotion. And the sanctuary is the place where the object of devotion is enshrined and Daimoku is chanted to it. And then next time we'll read President Ikeda's lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.